You know that specific kind of silence that happens in a boardroom when things go catastrophically wrong? It's not a peaceful silence, it's a vacuum. The sound of a dozen high-powered careers flashing before their eyes. And that was exactly the atmosphere inside the conference room at Vance Analytics last Tuesday. I'm Elena Vance, and I built this company from a garage startup into a billion-dollar predictive data empire. But in that moment, staring at the chaotic red lines on the projection screen, I felt like a fraud who had just been handed an eviction notice. We were days away from the biggest government contract in our history, a deal that would secure the company's future for the next decade. And our proprietary algorithm, the crown jewel, was bleeding out, spitting errors that my million-dollar engineering team couldn't fix. The air conditioning was humming too loud. The smell of stale coffee was making me nauseous, and to top it all off, my usual nanny had called in with the flu at 6 a.m., which meant my 8-year-old daughter, Maya, was currently sitting in the corner of this high-stakes disaster zone, coloring in a book that I prayed would keep her quiet for another hour. My chief technology officer, Marcus Thorne, a man who spent more on his suits than I did on my first car, was sweating through his Italian silk, tapping furiously on his tablet, muttering excuses about data variance and unforeseen anomalies, which in corporate speak basically means I have no idea what is broken. And I'm terrified. I was about to call a recess, just to breathe, just to stop the bleeding, when I heard the squeak. It was a sharp, piercing sound, the friction of a dry erase marker on a whiteboard. I turned around, ready to snap at whoever was interrupting my panic attack, and I froze. The entire room froze. It wasn't an engineer. It wasn't an analyst. It was Maya. She had climbed up on a chair to reach the top of the spare whiteboard, and she wasn't drawing ponies or rainbows. She was writing equations. Not simple arithmetic either. She was writing out a logic flow for a recursive error correction loop. A complex system of brackets and symbols that looked eerily like the solution we had been chasing for 3 weeks. Marcus stopped typing. The lead engineer dropped his pen. I walked over to her, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floor, feeling like I was walking through a dream. "Maya," I whispered, terrified to break the spell. "Honey, what is this? Who showed you this?" She didn't even look back, just kept capping her marker with a satisfying click, wiped a smudge of ink off her nose, and pointed toward the back of the room near the service entrance. "Mr. Artie showed me," she said, her voice small but certain. "He says the numbers are just like music, Mom. You just have to find the rhythm where the bad notes are." We all turned. Standing in the doorway, freezing mid-motion with a mop bucket on wheels, was Arthur, Artie, the building's night janitor. He was a man I had passed in the hallway 1,000 times, a ghost in a gray jumpsuit, always looking down, always retreating. He was maybe late 40s, but he carried himself like he was ancient, with graying temples and eyes that looked like they had seen the end of the world and decided to stay quiet about it. He looked terrified, gripping the mop handle like a weapon, his eyes darting between me and the board. "Who?" Marcus barked, breaking the silence with his signature arrogance. "The janitor? You're telling me the guy who empties the trash just solved a level 5 encryption error?" Marcus marched over to the board, scanning Maya's handwriting, looking for a flaw, desperate to find one. He traced the logic, his face twisting from mockery to confusion, and then, finally, to shock. The silence in the room shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was disbelief. Because the math worked. A child had just outlined the patch for a system that 20 PhDs couldn't crack. And she claimed she learned it from a man whose job description involved scrubbing toilets. Walked over to Artie, up close. He smelled like lemon disinfectant and old paper. "Did you teach her this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to reconcile the image of this invisible man with the genius on the whiteboard. Artie looked at his shoes, shifting his weight. She was bored, Miss Vance, he said, his voice raspy, like he hadn't used it in a while. I found her in the break room last week waiting for you. She looked lonely. We started drawing shapes on napkins. It's just pattern recognition. Kids are good at patterns if you don't tell them it's hard. Just patterns? Marcus scoffed, stepping into Artie's personal space, looming over him. That is proprietary coding logic, pal. That is company intellectual property. How did you get access to that? Have you been snooping on the servers? Looking at screens you shouldn't be looking at? Marcus turned to me, his face red. Elena, this is a security breach. A massive one. We have a janitor accessing classified algorithms and feeding them to a minor. I want security up here now. Wait, I said, putting a hand up. Marcus, stop. The math is right. If he knows how to fix it, I don't care if he invented the internet. Marcus yelled, and I saw the vein in his neck pop. This wasn't about security. This was about ego. Marcus was humiliated that a guy making minimum wage had outsmarted him in 10 seconds. We have investors coming in 3 days. We cannot have a loose cannon who pushes a broom compromising our data integrity. He goes, now or I walk and I take the engineering team with me. It was a bluff. Or maybe it wasn't, but in that high-pressure cooker of a moment, with the board breathing down my neck and the contract on the line, I panicked. I retreated into CEO mode, prioritizing optics over humanity. I looked at Artie, waiting for him to defend himself, to shout, to explain. But he didn't. He just looked at me with those tired, sad eyes, gave a small, resigned nod, and unclipped his badge. He placed it gently on the conference table. I didn't mean any harm, Ms. Vance, he said softly. Maya's a smart kid. Don't let them stomp that out of her. And then he walked out. He just walked out, leaving his mop bucket bubbling in the corner. Maya started crying, screaming that it wasn't fair. That Mr. Artie was her friend, but Marcus was already on the phone with HR, drafting the termination papers for gross misconduct. I stood there, watching the elevator doors close on the man who had just saved my presentation. And I felt a pit in my stomach so deep I thought it might swallow me whole. I had chosen the suit over the savant, and I just knew, I had made a catastrophic mistake. The next 48 hours were a blur of failure. Without Artie's patterns, Marcus and his team tried to reverse engineer what Maya had written, but they couldn't grasp the underlying logic. It was like trying to play a symphony by just reading the notes without hearing the music. The system kept crashing. The error logs were piling up. By Thursday night, the night before the big presentation, I was sitting in my office with the lights off, staring at the city skyline, realizing I was about to lose everything. My company, my reputation, my legacy. I looked down at my desk. Maya had left her backpack there. Sticking out of the side pocket, I climbed 4 flights of stairs that smelled like boiled cabbage and damp wool, and I knocked on door 4B. No answer. I knocked again, harder. Artie! It's Elena Vance. Open the door. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. Artie stood there in a t-shirt and sweatpants, looking even more exhausted than he did at the office. He didn't look surprised to see me. He just looked resigned. You here to take my mop bucket too, Ms. Vance? He asked, his voice dry. I know who you are, I said, breathless. I know you're Arthur Peneligon. I know you wrote the Icarus Code. He sighed, stepping back to let me in. The apartment was tiny, barely a studio, but one wall was covered in whiteboards, covered in the same beautiful chaotic math Maya had drawn. But that wasn't what stopped me. What stopped me was the sound of a machine beeping rhythmically from the corner of the room. Behind a curtain, Artie walked over and pulled the curtain back slightly. Sleeping in a hospital bed, hooked up to a ventilator and a dialysis machine, was a boy. He couldn't have been older than 10. He was pale, frail, looking like a breeze could blow him away. "That's Sam," Artie said quietly, adjusting the blanket. "He has a degenerative autoimmune condition. Expensive. Very expensive." It hit me like a freight train. "That's why," I whispered. "That's why you took the janitor job. The union benefits. The insurance. No engineering firm would hire me after what your company did to my reputation, Alina," Artie said, not with anger, but with a cold, hard factual tone that hurt worse than screaming. "I was radioactive. But I needed the insurance. I needed to keep Sam alive. So I shaved my beard, I changed my name on the application to just Artie, and I took the only job where nobody looks at your face. I've been emptying the trash cans of the men who destroyed my career for 5 years, just so my son can have another day." He turned to me, and for the first time, I saw the fire in him. "And you know what the worst part is? I watched Marcus Thorne butcher my code every single day. I watched him patch it with Band-Aids and ego, knowing exactly how to fix it, but knowing if I spoke up, I'd lose the insurance. Until Maya, she was innocent. She didn't care about stock prices. She just wanted to know how the world worked. I couldn't help myself. I felt tears stinging my eyes. The shame was overwhelming. We hadn't just fired a genius. We had enslaved him in his own creation. "Artie," I said, stepping forward, "the presentation is tomorrow at noon. The government auditors are going to be there. Marcus can't fix the system. It's going to crash and the company goes under. If the company goes under, the insurance plan goes with it." Artie looked at his son, then back at me. "Is that a threat?" "It's a plea," I said, grabbing his hand. "Come back. Not as a janitor, as the chief architect. We fix this tonight. We expose Marcus. We set it right, please." Artie stared at the wall of equations for a long time. He walked over to his desk, picked up a marker, and twirled it in his fingers. "I don't want the title," he said. "And I don't want to work for you. I want to work with you. And I want Marcus to admit what he did 5 years ago, publicly." "Done," I said. "Get your coat." We drove back to the tower in the dead of night, sneaking Artie in through the freight elevator like we were heist movie characters. We set up a war room in the server basement, ironically, the place he felt most comfortable. For 6 hours, I watched a master at work. He didn't just type. He conducted. He stripped away layers of Marcus's bloated, inefficient code and replaced them with elegant, streamlined logic. He showed me where Marcus had been falsifying data logs to hide the instability, creating a house of cards that was destined to fall by 6 a.m. The system was purring. It was stable. It was faster than it had ever been. We drank stale coffee and watched the sunrise over Lake Michigan, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually leading a company, not just managing a crisis, but we weren't out of the woods. Because Marcus Thorne is a lot of things, arrogant, sloppy, greedy, but he isn't stupid. He arrived at 8 a.m., looking fresh and smug, and when he logged into the system, he saw the changes. He saw the timestamp. He knew someone had been in the code. And being the snake that he is, he didn't confront me. He didn't call security. He did something much worse. He went into the back end of the presentation interface, the specific module that would be displaying the live data to the government officials, and he planted a logic bomb. A kill switch. He set it to trigger exactly 15 minutes into the demo, right when we would be showing the critical predictive model. He wanted it to fail. He'd rather burn the company to the ground and blame it on external sabotage or Russian hackers than admit that the janitor fixed his mess. He wanted to watch me fail so he could swoop in later with a new solution and take the CEO chair. Act 3 began at 11:55 a.m. The auditorium was packed. Senators, generals, tech journalists. The lights went down. I walked onto the stage, wearing my best power suit, but shaking on the inside. Artie was backstage, hidden in the wings, wearing a suit I had sent an intern to buy for him that morning. He looked terrified, wringing his hands, watching the monitors. I started the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are about to see is not just data. It is the future of security. I clicked the remote. The screens lit up. The audience gasped. The visualization was beautiful, a living, breathing map of global economic trends, updating in real time. It was perfect. 10 minutes in. Marcus was sitting in the front row, arms crossed, a little smirk playing on his lips. He checked his watch. He knew what was coming. 12 minutes. The data stream started to wobble. A few red pixels appeared on the giant screen. 14 minutes. The fan on the projector whirred louder. The image flickered. The logic bomb was executing. The numbers started to scramble, turning into gibberish. The audience started murmuring. Is this part of the simulation? Someone asked. Marcus stood up, buttoning his jacket, ready to play the hero. Ms. Vance, he boomed, projecting his voice to the back of the room. It appears we are experiencing a critical failure. Perhaps we should pause so my team can. Sit down, Marcus, I said into the microphone. My voice didn't shake. The room went dead silent. Marcus froze, looking like I'd just slapped him. Excuse me? He said, that oily smile slipping just a fraction. I said sit down, I repeated, louder this time. I turned to the audience, forcing a smile that felt like it was carved out of granite. What you are seeing right now is a deliberate stress test. We believe that a robust system must be able to identify and neutralize internal sabotage in real time. Because the greatest threat isn't always from the outside. Sometimes it's from the inside. I looked toward the wings. Chief Architect? Would you please stabilize the feed? Marcus looked around, confused. Chief Architect? I'm right here, he hissed. But out walked Artie. He stepped into the spotlight, and the change in him was physical. He wasn't hunched over a mop anymore. He walked with the stride of a man who built the ground he was walking on. He didn't look at the audience. He looked straight at the console. He plugged in his laptop. On the giant screen, the gibberish code was suddenly overlaid with a terminal window. Everyone watched as Artie's fingers flew across the keyboard. He wasn't just fixing the code. He was dissecting it. Isolating malicious script, Artie said, his voice amplified through the sound system. It was calm, authoritative. Source ID, user_mthorn_admin. Timestamp, 8:14 a.m. today. A collective gasp ripped through the room. Marcus's face went the color of cottage cheese. The screen displayed the kill switch code, highlighting Marcus's digital signature in bright, condemning neon yellow. Artie hit enter. Neutralizing threat. Restoring baseline. The red pixels vanished. The chaotic numbers snapped back into a perfect, elegant grid. The system didn't just recover. It sang. It processed the data faster than before, showing predictions with 99.9% accuracy. Artie turned to the audience. The anomaly has been purged. The system is secure. I looked at Marcus. He was standing there, mouth open, looking for an exit, but he was pinned by 300 pairs of eyes. Marcus, I said, I think security would like to have a word with you about industrial sabotage. Security didn't wait for an invitation. 2 guards, the ones who used to ignore Artie when he emptied their trash cans, walked down the aisle and escorted Marcus out. He was screaming about lawsuits, about loyalty, but nobody was listening. The applause started slowly, one of the generals in the front row, and then it swelled until the walls were shaking. We got the contract. We signed the papers that afternoon. But the real victory happened an hour later, in my office. Artie was packing up his laptop, ready to go back to Sam. "The board wants to offer you the CTO position, Artie," I said, sliding the contract across the desk. "Double Marcus's salary. Stock options. The corner office. It's yours. You earned it." Artie looked at the contract, then looked out the window at the city he had helped build. He smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached those tired eyes. He pushed the paper back to me. "I can't take it, Alina," he said. "What?" "Artie, you're crazy. This is millions of dollars. This is vindication."